Hello and welcome to week 5 of our study in the book of Ecclesiastes, living life backwards, how we might find true meaning and purpose in life when we recognize that much of life is hevel, vanity of vanities. It's that Hebrew word meaning that life is elusive and often fleeting. It is enigmatic, even though it is mysterious and beautiful. And when we try to grasp after it, we can't find it, like smoke through our hands, like a vapor in the wind. And so when we recognize this ending for all things, we actually have purpose for today. That this does not depress or make us feel a life of no purpose. It actually opens us up to a life of purpose. We'll have a better experience when we are experiencing pleasures and going through the accomplishments of life, when we recognize the joy it brings, but ultimately how it points us to the joy that God alone brings. When we go through seasons of life, no matter how difficult or hard, we recognize that God's in the midst of them and that we can embrace it and live well in the midst of it as we seek to honor God, as we yearn for eternity. In the last 2 weeks, last week and this week, we're talking about the meaning and purpose of life being ultimately found in not living for me, but living for we, for each other, that people matter. And when we live a people-centered, others-centered life, we end up loving people and loving ourselves. That's the invitation today from God's word. Loving others is loving ourselves. We find this as well in Ephesians. We talked about it, that when a husband loves his wife as Christ loved the church, he's actually loving his own body. Loving others is actually the best way in which we get to love and care for ourselves. We were not created to just be self-centered in our pursuits. In fact, that leads us away from a life of true meaning and purpose. And that's what we talked about in our text last week. We talked about it as well in Mark chapter 12, verse 29 and following, how this is the invitation from God in the great commandment, to love God, to love your neighbor as yourself. But in chapter 4, verses 7 and following, we see as well several other ways in which we get to live for others and find joy for ourselves. We say in verse 7, it says, "Again, I saw futility under the sun. There's a person without a companion, without even a son or brother. And though there is no end to all his struggles, his eyes are still not content with riches. Who am I struggling for?" he asks, "and depriving myself of good things. This too is futile, a miserable task." He very explicitly makes note here that if you're living your life and there are no one else that you are sharing it with, not a son, not a brother, no one else that you are investing in, that in the end the question is, why am I working so hard? Why am I going down this road? That to live for we means we get to live a life of generosity for others. That our motivation for work is so that we might give and love and help and support others. What a great reminder. To live for others in our work, in our pursuits. To not do it to just get acclaim and possessions for our own, but to be a generous person. You want to live a life of we. Love others by being generous with why you are working, to see them excel. And it gives meaning and purpose to the work that you are part of. You know this if you're raising a family. Maybe some of your motivations, right, for work is so that you can supply and provide and care for those around you. For some of you that are saying, "But Pastor Mike, I'm single," or "Pastor Mike, I'm no longer married," or "Pastor Mike, I've never been married. Who am I working for, living for?" Listen, this does not just mean biological. It means as well sociologically, relationally, communally based, spiritually based. How can I live my life for those around me in the community, for those around me in my extended sphere of relationships? How can I live for the glory of God through his church as I use the gifts he has given me in my work to generously bless others, to see the work of the gospel, the work of the kingdom, the work of God's church move forward as well? Your life could have meaning and purpose for others when we're generous. We see as well in verse 9, 2 are better than one because they have a good reward for their efforts. collaboration, working together. There's a joy in recognizing that the reward of their efforts is that they get to share with each other the journey. We talked about this theme that we are better together. That when we seek to work together and collaborate, not caring who gets the credit, we get to enjoy that process together and see the good reward for our efforts. That two are better than one. I want to see us as a church continue to grow in adopting this mindset and how we live and how we minister amongst each other in the church, that we're not looking for just solo Lone Ranger type servants, that it's not just about Pastor Mike or others that are up there on the platform, that it's about us together, caring about what we accomplish together for God's glory, for his purposes. Two are better than one. What a great reward. See, when we live for the benefit and for the excelling of others, we as well find great reward for ourselves. I hope you've had a boss like that who wants to see you excel in such a way, because seeing joy in your success means that together there's success. Companionship and collaboration like this, it's a gift of living for we. Are you a collaborator? We talked about then in verse 10. For if either falls, his companion could lift him up. But pity the one who falls without another to lift him. Also, if two lie down, they could keep warm. But how can one person alone keep warm? Support and comfort. That the journey of life is full of many ups and downs. And when we find ourselves in those down moments, we need each other. If we're living a solo Lone Ranger lifestyle and approach to ministry and to work and to raising our family, when we need help, we'll find ourselves alone. But here he's saying if either companion falls, the other one's there to lift him up. That we live in a fallen world that's difficult, and we need the support of others. He's saying it's better to lie down with another than to be alone. What does this mean? This metaphor of the comfort that comes, that knowing that someone is with you on the journey. It's not just talking about the marital relationship there, although no doubt it does apply. But it's the idea that comforting each other, being with each other, supporting each other, makes of the pursuits this side of eternity, life under the sun, full of meaning and purpose. When we live for we love others, and we love ourselves. We find support when we fall. We find comfort in those moments when we need it most deeply. Some of us are finding ourselves alone in some challenge we are going through in life, and it should not be a wonder to us. We have not lived an other-centered life. And when times get tough, you find yourself alone. I could think of moments in my life where I did not invest in others the way I should have. And when I struggled to go through a challenge, I thought I was alone in it. And then I could think of other moments when I really tried to collaborate and work together. And as we struggled through initiatives or struggled through disappointments, we had each other for the journey. We need each other like this in the church, don't we? To support and comfort each other for the task ahead. I mean, we talked about on Sunday our mission as a church to reach generations for Christ. That is not a mission that the world, the flesh, and the devil is in support of or excited about or going to allow us to pursue without struggle and difficulty and toil. We're literally waging spiritual warfare. As the scriptures tell us, we don't battle against flesh and blood. We battle against principalities and powers and spiritual forces. That the work God calls us to as followers of Christ, we better not go alone on it in our own pursuits. We will be disappointed. And you could see that. You could see that in leaders at times when they are going their own way without the support and collaboration and comfort of others, that they fall real quickly. And that temptation is there for all of us. Live for others, even in how we're accomplishing great goals, and find the comfort and support we need. So, once again, when we live for others, we live a generous life, a life that gives meaning to our pursuits. We live a life of collaboration, a life of support, a life of comfort. And then verse 12, if someone overpowers one person, the two can resist him. A cord of three strands is not easily broken, that there is as well strength and protection that comes with the others. This is the kind of life we want to live. A life that seeks to protect and help each other in our moments of greatest need. Living for we is actually the best way to love others and to love me. Then at the end of chapter 4, it lays out for us this little story of comparison. Who would you want to be? Look at these verses here. It says, better is a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer pays attention to warnings. For he came from prison to be king, even though he was born poor in his kingdom. I saw all the living who move above under the sun follow a second youth who succeeds him. And there is no limit to all the people who are before him, yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. This too is futile and a pursuit of the wind. Here it's talking about the choices we could have, to either be wise or foolish. He's saying to be wise in our life, to live others-centered, it may mean that we don't have all the accolades that this world offers. It may be that we look poor and youthful in the minds of the world, but there's no better way to live wisely. He contrasted with the foolish but old king who started off okay but ends up in the wrong pursuit. And as a result of that, how dangerous it is for someone with power to live alone and for me. See, this last illustration here is a warning for us. What do we want? Do we want a life of meaning and purpose that is wise living for others, even if it means poverty in the world's eyes? Or are we willing to sacrifice that in order to have power and position, even at the expense of those around us? What a great challenge. What a great challenge for leaders as well in this text. How will you lead? How will you use the time and the talents, the gifts, and the resources you have to serve others? So, chapter 4, we've spent the last 2 weeks looking into it in our small groups together. Living for me, living for we. Living for me means hating our neighbor and ultimately hating ourselves. It's a life that leads to oppression and envy, a life of laziness and manic busyness that hurts others and is actually dehumanizing to yourself. Confess any of those places where you are tempted. And then the second half, this great vision we talked about today, that to live for others means that we get to love them and love ourselves. And in the midst of it, we get to find the wonderful joy of being generous, that our work is not just meant to accumulate for ourselves, but to bless others around us. We find the joy that comes with collaboration. Two are better than one, that we are better together when we don't care who gets the credit. What a great invitation to a life of purpose. This is what this is about. And remember, it's echoing Jesus' words. Love God, love your neighbor as yourself, and find meaning and happiness and joy. That it helps us in support and comfort, especially when we stumble and fall and when we feel all alone. That when we have others that are walking with us on the journey, we know that we're not alone and that together we can face whatever is ahead of us. And that as well, from that comes protection. And so, will you be that young but wise? Or will you be that old but foolish king? Young and wise, old and foolish. We know the option. Choose it today. Live for we, not for me, and find the meaning and purpose in life that we all are looking for.